Absolute crores. Absolute crores square. Absolute crores power. Absolute higher. Absolute crores cube. Absolute crores double cubes. Absolute crores super cubes. Absolute infinity square. Absolute infinity power. Absolute higher. Absolute infinity power. Absolute crores. Absolute infinity power. Absolute crores power. Absolute higher. Absolute infinity square. Absolute infinity cube. Absolute infinity double cubes.
Absolute extreme. Absolute extreme square. Absolute extreme power. Absolute power. Absolute extreme power. Absolute crores. Absolute extreme power. Absolute crores power. Absolute power. Absolute extreme power. Absolute infinity. Absolute extreme power. Absolute infinity power. Absolute power. Absolute extreme power. Absolute infinity power. Absolute crores. Absolute extreme power. Absolute infinity power. Absolute crores power. Absolute power. Absolute extreme cube. Absolute extreme double cubes. Absolute extreme super cubes.
Quint power. Quint power. Absolute power. Quint power. Absolute crores. Quint power. Absolute power. Quint power. Absolute extreme. Super everything power everything. Quint power cube. Quint power double cubes. Quint power super cubes.
Sex PR power absolute PR. Sex PR power absolute crores. Sex PR power absolute infinity. Sex PR power absolute extreme. Sex PR power quint PR. Super duper everything power everything. Sex PR cube. Sex PR double cubes. Sex PR super cubes.
Sept pyre power absolute pyre. Sept pyre power absolute crores. Sept pyre power absolute infinity. Sept pyre power absolute extreme. Sept pyre power quint pyre. Sept pyre power sext pyre. Mega everything power everything. Sept pyre cube. Sept pyre double cubes. Sept pyre super cubes.
Alt power absolute infinity. Alt power absolute power. Alt power absolute crores. Alt power absolute infinity. Alt power absolute extreme. Alt power quint power. Alt power sex power. Alt power set power. Ultra everything power everything. Alt power cube. Alt power double cubes. Alt power super cubes.
Extreme affinity power absolute power. Extreme affinity power absolute crores. Extreme affinity power absolute infinity. Extreme affinity power absolute extreme. Extreme affinity power quint power. Absolute extreme affinity super duper. Extreme affinity power sex power. Extreme affinity power set power. Extreme affinity power warp power. Giga everything power everything. Extreme affinity cube. Extreme affinity double cubes. Extreme affinity super cubes.
Absolute possible.
Undeci pyre.
Oidisi yower.
Quadratic pyre.
Quindeci pyre. Sexteci power.
Septeci PR.
Octodeci pyre.
Novadeci power.
Absolute double impossible.
Absolute triple impossible.
Absolute quadruple impossible.
Absolute quintuple impossible. Absolute sextuple impossible.
Absolute sextuple impossible.
Absolute octuple impossible.
Absolute quadruple impossible.
Absolute Illuminati.
Gigafinity. Terrafinity. Petafinity.
Exactly.
Zephyrinity. Herzafinity.
Ratifinity.
Codifinity. Zetafinity. Wikifinity.
Absolutely, pi is everything.
Absolutely translated everything. Absolutely translated everything.
Absolutely pure is ultra everything.
Pi over. Omega pi over.
infinity pyre. Absolutely infinity pyre. Absolutely everything pyre. Absolute everything impossible pyre.
Absolute X pyre. Absolute double X pyre. Absolute X super pyre. Absolute X ultra pyre. Absolute X giga pyre. Absolute X tera pyre. Absolute X beta pyre. Absolute X exa pyre. Absolute X zeta pyre. Absolute X Google pyre. Absolute X yada pyre. Absolute X infinity pyre. Absolute X absolute infinity pyre. Absolute X absolutely everything pyre. Absolute always X pyre.
Absolute X every number pyre. Capital D pyre. Double capital D pyre.
Megapyre, Gigapyre, Terapyre, Petapyre, Exapyre, Zetapyre, Yadapyre,
Alphinity pyre.
Ultimate infinity pure.
Absolute Sinus Studio Function Pyre,
Profinity 4.
Masterfinity Pyre,
Infinity Pyre.
Infinity Pyre, Forcefinity Pyre, Absolute Super Duper Pyre, Absolute Ultimate Infinity Pyre,
Absolute yin yang.
Spinner's Pyre,
Absolute pyre.